Perfect. Thanks, Acacia. Hi, everyone. As Acacia mentioned, I am the Operations Administration Manager, and I oversee contracts and physical. And I want to make it sure it's very clear that this is local match transportation. We have other local match things for CDDPs, and this is only for transportation. So it is a DD53 service element. So transit districts choose to participate in local match. And what that means is we hold a contract with the transit districts for them to participate in local match. And they have specific requirements that they have to meet in order to participate in that. And they put in, and Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, they put in a pot of money to participate in local match, and they have a budget for it. And then the federal government matches that. So essentially, to the state, the local match transportation does not have a cost to it. So it is the most cost-effective form for transportation when you're looking at the cost-benefit analysis. However, local match transportation at this time is only for clients that have to from work or DSA. We have not opened it up to anyone else. And it is only for individuals that need door-to-door transportation, door-to-door services. So it picks them up from their home and takes it directly to the job that they're going to or the DSA program that they're going to. The transit districts, some transit districts, I will say, do have their own criteria and their own evaluation when it comes to the door-to-door services. So they may choose to do an evaluation outside of what we have through the ISP and all that stuff. And I have had questions come in before and have had conversations with transit districts in the past of, well, we don't see why this person needs to have door-to-door services. And usually at that point in time, the service coordinator will meet with the transit district and maybe give a little bit more of a background. The person may not have a visible disability of why they need door-to-door transportation. And there may be something else for that. So there are those conversations that does come up, and there's conversations to take place. Again, this is the most cost-effective transportation service. So if you have somebody that is enrolled in to-from employment or DSA, and they need that door-to-door service, this should be what you're picking for them.
And they, sorry to chime in, and they have Medicaid as well. They have to be Medicaid eligible because it's a full Medicaid program.
Yes, thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
And then the big thing is local match is not in Express, which is why we have this nice, wonderful spreadsheet that Dawn is going to show all of you. And that spreadsheet is set up because to do the checks that Express would do. So she'll go into all of that. I'm not going to get into all of that. I think I'm ready for the next slide. So there are different requirements for CMEs and for the mass transit districts. So for the CMEs and for brokerages, as it was mentioned, this is new to you. So we understand there's going to be some adjustment in how you will do this. You will need to find or appoint, that sounds weird. You will have to identify a single point person for communicating with the transit district and the ODDS staff. Because brokerage is mostly spread out amongst multiple counties and service areas, you may have some clients that are eligible and other clients that are not eligible. For example, in Marion County, we have Salem Transit. Salem Transit only covers an area in the city of Salem and over into West Salem. So that is the area. The rest of Polk County and the rest of Marion County is not covered under that. Some transit districts have expanded their area. Lane Transit District will go over to an area in the coast, and they have a different rate for that. So depending on where you're located, you will see different things on your form, which is why it is specific to you and your area. The CME needs to identify who is eligible for local mass transportation and is interested in the service. Like Dawn said, they have to have door-to-door. They have to be Medicaid eligible. They cannot navigate transportation without door-to-door services. To from work-related services, or DSA. The question will come in, I know, of what if they're not enrolled in VR or have an employment service and they have a job on their own. Dawn will address that, and that will be coming up. Or they have a career development plan, and they don't have any other to from work-related transportation services. There are, of course, always exceptions, and if they do need another, for example, if they need to go, their hours are from 8 a.m., well, let's say from 12 p.m. until 10 p.m. at night, and the transit district stops serving that area at 8 o'clock at night. They need to have some sort of transportation to go home, and that would be an example of an exception. And that somebody will be present at both ends of the trip. So somebody is meeting the individual when they get to work or the DSA program, and somebody will be there when they get home. We have run into problems around that, so that is very important to take care of. They are contracted services. Again, ODDS holds the contract with the transit district. We negotiate those every biennium, and we negotiate the rates depending on when the transit district wants to do it, almost every year. And then again, as I mentioned before, the transit districts have that budget and that pot of money that they are putting in. So they do cap this program. I should say some of them cap this program based on that. So if you reach out to a transit district and they say they have a wait list, they probably truly have a wait list because they've reached their cap. I think right now with COVID, it may be a little bit different. I don't know. I think it depends on, again, on which transit district you're working with. TriMet would have probably a bigger cap and may be reaching their cap at this point, whereas Rogue Valley may have plenty of space on there. And if they don't have capacity, just again, ask to be on the wait list. And I'm ready for the next slide. So the mass transit provider, and I also want to preface this with, we always get new transit districts added to the program. It doesn't happen often, but we do get connected with other transit districts in Eastern Oregon or in the Gorge or something like that that are interested in becoming a local match provider. So while you may have an area that isn't part of local match at this point, it doesn't mean that that area may not be on the list in the future. So the mass transit district, they have the control of the capacity. They have what area they will serve and what falls into local match. Some of those are, like I said, very specific, and we can give you guys, especially those that are new to the program, brokerages and such, we can give you maps that are in their contracts and show you what area they are. And you could also work with your transit district around that. They have the resources to increase the rides. They may increase them, they may decrease them. They confirm the local portion of the increased rides. They confirm the individual cannot navigate transportation. As I mentioned, they may have their own criteria or evaluation that they do. If the mass transit district does not have capacity to grow, they will maintain the wait list and move that through. And if they do have room to grow or have room for capacity, they will work with the CME to identify the contacts on each end of the route, the location for contingency plans for drop off and pickup, and work with the person to identify the scheduling rides. And then they will also review the form that Dawn is going to share and confirm that they were all there, that what rides they provided and all of that. I went through that really fast, so I hope everybody got all of that.
Maybe before we switch to Dawn and Heather, if that's okay, there's a couple of questions
I saw them coming in and I was trying to track them and I couldn't.
I was too.
There is a question about Eastern Oregon and questions about local match in Eastern Oregon. I know, Heather, you're most familiar. I'll put a link into our website, which does list out where we've got local match, but we do have limited local match capacity. We're always trying to grow it, and if we can identify a transit district that can fulfill that governmental entity role, we're always happy to work with them to enroll in this local match program, but sometimes it can be challenging. And what we found is that when people who actually live in the area and people with IDD and self-advocates work with their specialized transportation funds, STF, board group for their area, that they tend to get the furthest. And so that would be my suggestion. But Heather or Dawn, if you've got other thoughts.
Well, the Eastern Oregon, CAT currently is one of the local match providers. People Movers, I don't know if they go under CAT. I've never heard of them directly contracting with us. Sometimes with the mass transits, they may have a subcontract with somebody, and Heather, you can speak to that if they're allowed to do that or not. But I think that if they've got a program that's under them, for example, Salem Mass Transit is called Cherry Lift for the lift part, but they're Salem Mass Transit for the bus part. So I don't know if People Movers is kind of the same thing with CAT. I don't know. I've never heard the People Movers before. And it has to be a mass transit provider. We can't contract, like Dial-A-Bus is not a mass transit provider. The brokerages will not be able to use them.
And the transit districts have to be government entities. So I don't know if People Movers is a government entity, or like Dawn said, if they're underneath Mid-Columbia CAT at all. I know I've heard of them, and I just
it's a Grant County specific program. It's
okay.
The local transportation for Grant County.
Okay. And those, that would have to be a specific, probably work with Heather directly to see if they could qualify or not.
And the transit district needs to be interested in becoming part of the contract. So if you have a contact there and you want to connect with them and say, hey, there's this great program, can you feel free to give them my name and number or email, and I can connect with them and go over the contract requirements for the local match program.
So then there's another question, Heather, about the responsible party at the employment destination be a team of natural supports or coworkers that could switch off. So long as there's someone there, does it have to be paid support?
It does not have to be paid support. It just needs to be somebody there to meet the person, to get them, make sure they've arrived safely. Some transit districts are very cautious as to where they're dropping people off and want to make sure they're safe so that they reduce their liability.
There's another question about whether or not local match is still 10 rides per week.
It is not.
Technically it is. Oh, it is not. I thought it still was.
I do not believe it's in the contract.
Okay.
I don't have the contract pulled up, and because I'm on Zoom, I can't pull it up, but I will confirm. I believe we've taken it out of the contract for 10 rides per week, because we do have people that do multiple times. It's an average of 10 rides, but I will double check and get back to everyone.
Well, that's good for me to know, because I wrote everything in here for 10 rides.
Let's go with 10 rides, and if it's different, I will let everyone know.
Okay.
We ran into the issue where people worked multiple jobs or needed multiple rides in a day. So I think, anyway. The other thing that
for those we've been allowing it, but we do exceptions. That's how we've handled it in the past, is we'll just do an exception saying that they have 2 jobs, or that they work 6 days a week instead of 5.
Right. So then the other question that's coming up, and we've had this question a lot, and as we expand to brokerages, of course, counties have in-home as well, but not near obviously the number that brokerages do. And so for folks that are in-home, they're typically going to use transportation that's not a residential provider for community transportation. So typically, if you're doing local match, in order to ensure that you're not getting duplicate rides, we'll do an exception for any additional type of transportation. Right now, that's our process, but as we're thinking this through, we'll have some more internal conversation about that, because for folks that are in home, they're not going to have a residential provider to do that transportation outside of local match.
So I think that how, Acacia, we can talk about it later, but when I do my checking to see if they have more than one, it's only if they have a WD, which is to and from work. If it's a WE, it doesn't matter. They can have as many of those as they want that fits policy, but it's just the WD. So if they have a bus pass and Lyft, I would be questioning that, because Lyft is a door-to-door service, a bus pass isn't necessarily. So that would be a good one, for example, that would have further questioning on why do they have both. Another one that we run into is if they have a Lyft pass that they pay for, a monthly pass for their WE, their community transportation, they probably would not get local match as well, because that would be technically to the feds considered double dipping. We'd be paying that provider twice to do services if we've paid for a monthly pass already.
And I think that addresses Sarah's question about, can the customer also purchase a bus pass through their plan? For example, if they're accessing local match for employment, but also need transportation to from for social events. And I know that does happen, but usually sometimes in this case, if they still need that door to door, they sometimes have a PSW or somebody that rides with them for that bus pass to meet that need.
Which those are okay.
Yeah.
I know there's a few more questions, and as we always do, we will keep this chat. We'll make sure as we're updating worker guide and answering questions that we can get this information out there. We also have a section in the worker guide, as you all know, for frequently asked questions. So anything we need to clarify from today's call, we'll put in that frequently asked questions section. But I am gonna, just because of time, to make sure we can stay on time, I'm gonna move us forward. I'm going to drop in the chat box this PDF right now, as well as the Excel document. And I've got a few emails. I'm gonna email those out. So Dawn, are you ready?
Yep, I am.
Okay. Here we go.
Hi, everybody. So this time around, I did some screenshots. Originally, when I planned this, I was going to try to do it live, but after our last Zoom meeting, I got booted out and had all kinds of problems, so I didn't want that to happen again. So if you look at this first screen, for anybody who hasn't done local match before, the first step would be identifying who is it within your own agency that is going to get referred to local match. And once you have that list, it's up to you how you do that in your own entity. It's not something we prescribe. So you may have case managers and personal agents who pick out those people and identify who they are through their ISP process, or you may have a transportation coordinator. It's all over the board how people do it. But ultimately, somebody has to be responsible to look up the person and make sure that they have the right name and the right prime. In the past, I've had some issues where nicknames have been put in, or names with quotation marks, parentheses, commas. All of that cause the queries that run to double check all this is okay to fail. And when this actually goes into Express, which I'm trying to help train people for, you won't be able to do that. You know from other services you would have to go directly in and use the proper name that was entered into Express. When I say proper, it may not be the name they prefer to go by, but what their name is in Express. So here's an example. You'll see that the names are kind of funky. It's because I went into the practice world and it redacts names and it doesn't come back with real names. So, where'd we go?
I'm having trouble sharing the screen and adding it to the chat box. So I'm trying to figure out what.
I had a feeling that might happen. So here, I wrote notes on each of these, and you're more than welcome to look at them. And like she said, if you have more questions still. So this is where you'd actually go and look for the person if you didn't know their prime already, or if you knew their prime but not their name. This is another way to find them. And then if you know the prime already, you can go to the next screen, please, Acacia. If you know the prime already, up one. Oh, sorry, we're not there yet. So here we are. If skip my, you know the prime already. In the client view, if you didn't know the prime already, you can see where I've circled, there's your prime. And if you look down, it'll tell you if they're DD eligible or not. And that's a criteria, is they have to be enrolled in DD services. And this is one way to tell that. And you just need to make sure that their termination date is in the future. So this example, it's 12/31/9999, they're good. And if you want to continue scrolling down, Acacia, this is another place to check if they're Medicaid eligible. Once again, their eligible end date is 12/31/999, so they're good there. And if you want to go to the next screen, if you had known their prime and you didn't need to go look up their prime or their name, you could go straight to their plan of care to find the information, and you would want to pick the plan that falls within the time period you're authorizing their services. And next screen. When you get into there, it would be that service eligibility tab. I'm going to call it a tab. Some people may call it something different, but that's what I mean when I refer to a tab. If you clicked on that, this window would open. And here's where you could see the DD eligibility and the Medicaid eligibility as well. So you have two ways you could go about that. And it has to be an accepted plan of care that you're looking at. And next screen. Then on the community tab is where you would find if they have employment services, and if they, for this example I'm giving you is one where they don't have any employment services, and that's where I would go look to see, do they have a career plan that shows they're self-employed or that they're working with voc rehab. So to see where I would find that is the next screen down. You'd go to the plan overview tab. And if you can see where I circled in blue, it says career plan development. It might have a different title to it, depending on who put it in there. You guys name things kind of differently at different places. But ultimately, what you're looking for is the career plan development. And if you hit the hyperlink, which you can go down again, Acacia, you'll find something similar to this. I had to take out the name. I used a real one, and I had to take out the name. So that's why it says full name. At the time, I didn't know what the name would be for the person, and I wouldn't have been able to figure it out. So this is an example of one where they don't have VR and they don't have our services, but they have a job. So they would be eligible for that criteria, that they have a job for the to and from. And if you see, I circled that it's still good. This was for the month of March that it was being authorized, so they're good through March. But after March, they wouldn't have anything to cover it. So at that point, I would need to be able to find an updated career plan, or it would need to be, I know that for some COVID stuff, and Acacia, you can correct me, for some COVID stuff, there's been some extension on days because of not being able to see people in person. I don't know if this is one of the things that you guys have extended or not. Are you there?
It looks like she's trying to get her mute off.
I can see that.
There we go. Yeah, so I mean, we're being pretty flexible right now in terms of timelines. So yeah. If it's not able to get updated because of COVID, it could be retro based on that COVID policy, but it's still important to keep it updated, especially as we, knock on wood, start to unwind the COVID policies here in the maybe near future.
So like I said, I will probably reach out to you if I see that they don't have one, and not just assume they're not eligible. Next screen. And oh, I did want to say on that one, and we can still stay on this screen, if you have somebody who doesn't have a plan of care, which I've had one or two out there over the years, where they're just enrolled with DD, they have no other services but case management, and they do local match. and they're self-employed. In those situations, I can speak for Jackson County as one of them. They just emailed me the career plan, and I keep it in a file folder that I look at every time and go, okay, it's still good, it's still good. So, I mean, that is one of the oddball situations that could be out there. And if you come across it and you don't remember the steps, just call me or send me a message through this CAU invoice box. So the next step that we check on these is, do they have transportation for a WD, which is the to and from work? This example, they're good. They have no other transportation. If they'd had a transportation line in here that was a WE, I would ignore it because it doesn't apply. The only reason I'd look at it is if it said they purchased a lift pass, then I would be reaching out and saying, hey, this is, you know, there's no way to know that they're not using their lift pass for both, and it could cover both. If it's an unlimited pass for the month, then we'd probably say local match is not a thing for them. Next screen. So this, it's hard to fit the entire spreadsheet in one view. So this is a really quick view just to show you. And then Acacia sent an actual copy of the Excel doc that's just a limited one that's a sample. If you look here, the mass transit provider name I will be entering and it'll be locked. The mass transit provider number I enter, it's locked. And the rate per ride authorized, I enter and it's locked. The field month, year of service will need to be updated by the CME every single month that they turn this in. I recommend that you keep, you save your copy and make a new copy of it for the next month. It doesn't mean you have to re-enter every single thing about a person. You just need to confirm all of that information is still valid each time. And the reason I recommend you save it is if you're ever audited and you don't keep a copy of each of those months, you're going to have a bit of an issue. I think that I've seen patterns where I think that some CMEs may have just been using the same one over and over and not saving it. So I'm really stressing it's important to save a copy each month for yourself if you're audited. So the CME name, Jackson County, you would put that in that first line. And I use Jackson County, so I apologize, Jackson, I'm not picking on you. It just happened to be the one that I had open. Jackson County is the county name, and the contract number, you would put that in. It should autofill all the way down the way I've, for every line beneath it. Then you would need to put in the client name as it was displayed when you opened up that client view or the plan of care. And then if you have a nickname, this is a new field that was not on the old forms for those of you who have used it. Now there's a client preferred name. So it could be a nickname, it could be another name they go by, or they don't use their hyphenated name completely, their legal name. It can be whatever. Here's where you can put your quotation marks, your parentheses, all that can be there. Client prime number has to be the actual prime number. Note special directions was a field I'd been asked to add by several CMEs, and that's internal. You can use that to communicate within your own agency, or you can use that to communicate with your mass transit provider if you have something you want to tell them. And then there's the initial authorization start date. If for those of you who have riders already and have had them for a long time, I don't expect that to be filled in. It's anybody new that you get on board. When did they start? And for anybody ending, this final authorization end date is really important, because if that's not put on there, TriMet, for example, might give more rides and they don't know the person is not eligible anymore. So that's a real vital one if you know in advance. Some of you have had issues where you don't know until a month after or 2 months after, and the best we can do is add it once we know. Individual requires door-to-door. You have to answer that question. From here out, the questions are drop downs and it's a yes, no, yes, no. If you type yes or no, it'll display, but if you type I don't know or unknown, it's not going to work because it's validation of yes or no. If the answer is no on either one of those two questions, they're not eligible. So scroll down, please. Here would be that second half if you could see the whole page across. And it says, the next question on there is, do they have a plan of care? Do they have employment in their plan of care? Yes or no? This example I just showed you, no, they didn't. So the next question would have to be answered. And that one is a drop down as well. And it has, I think, one of 2 or 3 choices. Oh, here, I listed it below. Employed, no employment services DSA and plan of care, or receives employment services not funded by ODDS. And that not funded by ODDS typically is the VOC rehab program. Occasionally, it might be they're transitioning out of school and they may have employment stuff that they started at school, and they could do the local match through us. And then, does the individual have other transportation? In this scenario, it was no. If the answer was yes, I'm going to go over that in the next scenario. And then the only exception is if any individual does not have a POC. I talked about that on the last screen. And at that point, you would copy the career development plan and email it to the CAU invoice at cauinvoice@dhsoha.state.or.us. And I see that there's a question. I'm going to just peek real quick before I move on and see if there's anything here that I can answer.
I can answer Terry's question.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
It's already covered in the workload model.
Perfect. Okay, next screen, please. So the next example I'm giving, we'll look up another person. I just repeated that same screen of here's how you'd look them up for the plan of care. So let's go to the next screen after that. And then the next screen, same thing, we'd go look at that service eligibility, the first priority of, are they DD eligible? Are they Medicaid eligible? In this scenario, yes, they are. The next screen, please. If I click on the community box, I can see that yes, they had a job, and I just make sure that that date range is covered and that it's an accepted status. And so that covers that one. They definitely have a job, or a support service that's related to employment or DSA. So next screen. Transportation. So in this example, this person does have a WD, and it covers that month of March that we were doing this authorization for. And so in this scenario, I need to make sure there's an exception out there. And if you go to the next screen, under the plan overview is where all attachments go. And for this example, I made one and it says exception on it. You may see different titles on it, basically because you guys save them differently at different places, but it's the exception that you're looking for. So if you click the hyperlink on that, next screen, please. Sorry, I'm like, Acacia, click the hyperlink, please. This is an example of one that you might see. They're not all exactly the same, so it may look differently, but this is an example of one that you probably would see. And your big things that I highlighted is that it is approved, that it's for the person that you're looking for, is identified on it, the date ranges is identified. And for this one, it's really important that it's somewhere say that they have local match and they're getting another transportation and the reason. So for this one, it's the example Heather was giving where they get off work and the mass transit doesn't work. You know, Salem's a prime example. They don't do service after a certain time and they don't do service on Sundays. At least they didn't. I don't think they do now still. In that situation, if somebody works on a Sunday, they'd have to have a different provider for to and from work. So, and this, you would follow whatever the current exception policy is of how you ask for an exception. And Acacia could probably speak to that if I have that wrong. I think that that's in your worker guides on how to request an exception and how that process goes and where it gets sent. Is that the case? Great. Okay. Next one, please. And for this example, I didn't write all the notes again, but it was just to have you see, once again, same thing. It auto-filled the Jackson County and the contract number because you put it on the first line. This person didn't have a preferred nickname. There wasn't a note. And yes, they had Medicaid, and yes, they were eligible, and they're not going to be stopping services. Next screen. For this one, the answer for the plan of care was yes, they had it. So you didn't have to answer the question that talked about, you know, that they had a career plan. Then the question that is being answered on here that's important is do they have other transportation? The answer was yes. So then you have to answer the next few questions. And that would be, does the individual have an exception approval? Yes. And then there are drop downs. And if you look in the writing I did below, it gives you the options that are there. And it's lives or works outside of the transit district service area, another provider's authorized mileage to and from work, or it might be they have a cab. That whatever that other is there. Typically, I would say 90% of the time or more, it's mileage. Multiple job sites requiring more than 2 rides per day. Works more than 5 days per week, requiring more than 10 rides per week. And this is the one that we'll have to work with Heather.
I have an answer.
Yes, you do?
I do. It is still in the contract that we are only allowed 10 rides per week. So in a calendar week, which a calendar week is Sunday through Saturday.
Okay.
So that is still there. So if they do need that, and I recall now as I was talking to transit districts, the reason for that is because they have to be able to budget and put in how much money they have.
Exactly. I thought that there was a reason for it.
Yeah.
And so you can have more. It's just unfortunately or fortunately, you have to do an exception for it. And then other reason identified and exception approval would be that generic you pick if you don't fit one of the other 3. I am begging people to not just default to using that. If really they fit one of the other 3, I would really appreciate that. And the next screen, please. Okay, great. So this is an example of an email from the county or the CME, the brokerage, sending in their actual spreadsheet. I'm giving this because the email box it goes to is shared for all of the contracts for ODDS, and there are copious amounts of emails that go in there daily, and they get moved around to different folders for different staff that are in there. So it's really, really important that you identify if you're Jackson or SDRI or whoever you are, and identify the mass transit provider that it's for 53 transportation and the month it's for. Those are really important. When you don't put that on there, it can get lost and stuck in the wrong folder. And when that happens, it's kind of a sad thing. So hopefully people can do that and follow through with it. The other thing is when you attach those emails, it needs to have the pound secure pound unless you happen to be one of the counties or brokerages. I think it's only the counties right now that I know of. It might be some brokerages that already have a secure where they don't have to put secure pound and it comes over securely. That's fine too. And if you have your own secure system, I'm asking that you not use it because it is virtually impossible for me to know 36 to 40 different systems of pass codes, and it's not always me that opens these, so then another person has to have their own. So please use the pound secure pound unless you already know you have a direct that you can do it without. And I want to say it's like Multnomah and Washington are 2 of them that I know of. That don't have to have the pound secure pound. They already have a connection with us that's secure without that. Okay, great. EOSSB has one too, so perfect. Okay, wait, pound secure pound, does that initiate? Yes, it does. Pound secure pound does initiate it. And if there is some directions on how to create one on your own, and I can send that out. Julie Harrison had written that up years ago, and I think it still works how she wrote it. If not, you can always send the CAU invoice box an email that says the same thing. This is Jackson County local match. And then one of us can reply with the pound secure pound for you. You'll just need to list everybody you want on that thread because you won't be able to add people or take people off of it once it's made. And next screen, please. All right, so the next screen is just to show on the transit side, if we have any transit folks on here, they may care, or if they aren't on here, then for you guys that are the CMEs to see what they do next. That document you have will have a few tabs in it, but one of the two is the authorized that I just showed you, and the other is the invoice. The invoice one will autofill everything at that top. It'll autofill with the provider name, the provider number, the month that you put on the authorized tab, the rate. It'll autofill with the CME name, CME contract number, the client express name, the client preferred name, the prime, initial authorized, and those all are populated from what you put on the other tab. The only thing that they can manually change is if they have a different client preferred name that they use than you, they can type over that and change it, but it will initially autofill with what you gave them. And then the transportation provider notes, they have their own notes that they can put in there that are either for me or for them internally. And if you have notes for them, they would just read it on the authorization tab. It wouldn't auto pull to here. And then they have the same process they had in the past, which is for each ride, they put a 1, and it's the dates there go 1 to 31, and they only do the number of days in the month. It's not set up like Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, because I'd have to do a new one every single time for each month. And it tallies to the bottom and it tallies across to a total. And I think that's all I really need to cover here. And then this is an example. Most of the CMEs are never going to see this. This is for the mass transit providers. When they send in the invoice to be paid, that's when I do all my checks and I run things through the data warehouse to look and see, do they have, you know, employment or not? Do they have DSA or not? Do they have other transportation? And then I do some manual lookup when I need to. When I'm done and I say, okay, great, these are all eligible or not, this is the standard email template I send out. And it'll always have, you know, the pound secure pound. It'll say it's for 53 local match. It'll say what county, who the mass transit is, and what month it's for. And then the verbiage is literally a template I paste in. And it'll always say what, you know, the in boundary, out boundary, and or it's the base rate or the prime premium rate, depending on what the terminology is for that particular contract. And it'll say the number of rides they asked for and the number that were eligible. If there's a different number for eligible, it will be listed whose rides were denied. Up above, you'll see there's 2 attachments, and one says review on it and the other says ineligible, and I'll show you what that looks like. It'll list their name, their prime, the number of rides denied, and it'll be under a category Y. The total amount allowable tells you what the match project is, and then the local portion tells them what is it that they have to pay in, and they literally pay in a check. And then once we get that check, that's proof that yes, they have the funds to cover. Then we return those funds and the match from the federal government, and we process and ask the feds to pay that. And then you'll see some verbiage there. That in the blue circle that's not highlighted in yellow has to be on any, when the mass transit sends in that local portion, that verbiage has to be on there, and that's where it gets sent to. If it's not, it goes to the DHS accounting department, and the accounting department, oh wow, I didn't realize that Acacia, on the real version, is it overlapped on the bottom like that, where the text is in blue?
Yeah, it is. We can fix it.
Thank you. I didn't even realize it was like that. I don't know what I did to make that one happen that way. I apologize to anybody who already has it. We'll get you a cleaner one. But anyways, it's important to have that one go to the right mailing address to the DHS receiving and trust, and two, that it clearly identified the things listed above. If not, APD goes through them, child welfare goes through them, everybody goes through them. And we've had our local match stuff accidentally get credited to the APD side if they do both, if that's not on there. Next screen. So this is example of that eligible attachment. It'll say what months it's for. It'll say what CME it's for, the contractor information. And if there was an outbound on this or a premium, it would say, you know, base, premium, inbound, outbound, and it would list the number of rides that you billed for under those. And then the one below is in the blue section, is what rides were eligible, and it has the rate of pay, the rides, and then it breaks it out to what's the total amount, the local portion, the federal. And once again, if they had an outbound or premium, it would be the second line and then to give you the total. Below that in the, I'm going to call it lavender, but I don't know, some people might call it pink. The please review and adjust for future is if the CME does not put the actual exactly how it is in Express, I will show you what it is in Express and what you used, or if you used a prime that wasn't a real prime, so I had to do a lot of manual research to figure out who it was if I could. It'll be on there. I'll send that to the mass transit to say, heads up, in the future this has to be corrected. And I will also send an email to the CME saying, please fix this for the future. And then next screen, please. I spared you all examples of real people that were denied only because I did not want to have to sit and manually change names and all kinds of fun stuff that's not fun. But these are the categories you will typically see things under, which is ineligible, not on prior auth ridership roster. The way the forms are now, that should not happen. In the past, it was not auto-filling for the mass transit provider, so they may have accidentally put somebody on there that really wasn't ours. They might have been a private pay person, or they might have been somebody on the APD side. So this should not fill in that often. But where this is, it's saying that the CME never put them on their authorization list and the contractor billed. The next one is ineligible, no Medicaid or enrollment. That's pretty self-explanatory. This would be that the CME didn't double check that they were still authorized or enrolled. Occasionally, we have that fun thing where things go retroactive and they go back to change that they're not Medicaid. We all know that happens. There's not much we can do about it. In that situation, it would be giving a heads up to both you and the mass transit that they're not eligible anymore, or is there something that needs to be fixed in the system so that they really are still eligible. Ineligible rides, no auth and express for employment or DSA in accepted status, or ISP with employment related services not funded by IDD. So this is basically that one where I said if you don't have the services, that there needs to be a career plan that could be looked at to say, yep, they have something that covers them going to and from a work or DSA. And then the next one is ineligible rides due to other transportation express without an exception. Self-explanatory there too. And then reduced rides over max monthly without exception. So I do look at if some months, 44 rides would be the max, some it would be 46, 48. It's based on that work week in the month. And I look at the calendar and say, oh, this one's a 48. You submitted 50 and they didn't have an exception, then 2 of those rides would be denied. Those are very rare that those happen. And almost always there's a reason and we get to talk through it, and typically those rides would be restored unless it was absolutely no, there's no way to get around it. And I think that gets to the end of what we were going over.
Great, perfect. So thank you, Dawn. There are a few
Welcome.
questions. Is it all right if I scroll back up and read a couple of them?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so we have a question about which exception number to use in requesting an exception, and I apologize. I would need to look at that form to get the number, but it's really just a general exception for transportation that comes into us, and when it's local match, we coordinate with Heather and Dawn to make sure that it would be appropriate. So any transportation exception request gets filtered to my team, and then we coordinate that internally. Another question about what if an individual loses their job and the individual doesn't communicate that with the case management entity, so they're no longer going to from work. I'm not quite sure why they would continue to use local match to a job site if they're not working there anymore. But I don't know, Heather or Dawn, if you've had other experience with that.
So can you rephrase? So you're saying that they no longer work and they're not doing DSA at that site. They're just going.
I'll clarify. That was my question. So we have a client. So the example you gave, a client isn't receiving any DD services, but rather in their CDP has, they've identified that they're actually working. They have a job and they don't need services from BRDD. So they lose their job. They don't notify the CME, but they continue to use the local match service for other reasons.
They're
but
not
they don't
eligible.
Well, I understand that, but what happens if we're not notified?
Heather?
If they're not eligible, so it's something that we would have to discuss it and figure it out, because this SC should be doing follow-ups and check-ins and all that stuff with the individual. And if they are no longer eligible and the transit district sees that they are going to a different spot instead of where they normally go, then there should be communication. That, I mean,
You're right, there should be, but in reality, local transit doesn't have time to, look at.
They should be, though. They're getting paid a way higher rate for doing this program, and it is their responsibility.
But it's always after the fact, so.
So Terry, we need to take this one offline, because we know this is an issue you've had, and to be honest, I have not had any other CME with this issue on an ongoing basis. It might have been a rare once in a blue moon, but not an ongoing. So
I was just putting it out there for the rest of the CMEs, because it does happen. It's not just Clackamas County. I know you think it is, but it is happening.
Well,
I didn't say.
You're also dealing with a larger entity than most folks with TriMet. And so that's the other reason to take it offline, because we've got the contract with TriMet that we have to manage. So I think that's one that if it does happen, reach out to us, let us know that something's gone on where the person was going to a place and we weren't aware. Once we're made aware, we'll figure it out, because we also have to help with that contractor on our side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Acacia.
and I think that is also the importance of making sure you're checking and sending in those reports to each other. And it's a CME and a transit district thing of making sure you're communicating well with each other, sending in the reports timely every month, so everybody can see and do those checks. So I think that's an important thing that we need to communicate. And in the worker guide, I don't know if we have it on any of the slides, there is a timeline of when you guys send the documents to the transit district, when the transit district sends it to us. And these are all agreements that were made years ago. So it's important for those timelines to stay consistent so that we aren't having that miscommunication and there's that verification that people are writing.
And this particular situation Terry is referencing, we've had discussions with TriMet about their process for scheduling rides. And so hopefully that is going to reduce this happening, because it also is on the mass transit provider side. that whoever is scheduling and their process for it, that they double check this is a to and from work transportation, and not just assume that the person calling in to make the ride realizes that there's a difference, because sometimes our providers don't, the direct providers for folks, or the individual scheduling the ride. So there has been some, just so Terry knows, there has been discussion to try to help prevent this, but, and like I said, it has happened, but it is extremely rare that this has happened in other counties. We've had it, but it's been very rare.
Yeah. So I'm going to use this to shift us over to a question about eligible and ineligible, and what happens when somebody becomes ineligible for this particular type of transportation, and whether or not a notice is required. And that is really going to come down to why they're ineligible. If they're ineligible because they're no longer working and they can continue with other transportation like a pass or community transportation, that they continue to be eligible for transportation. And so we would want to move over and continue to provide that service in another way. However, if they're no longer eligible because they lost their Medicaid, or basically they're not going to be eligible for any transportation service, then we would need to go forward with a notification of planned action and just the regular notices that we would do when somebody is no longer Medicaid eligible.
And I will say also that some of the transit districts, TriMet being one, they will suspend rides if somebody is has a behavior or something significant. And in the contract, they are to send that notification to the individual and to the CME. So you guys may get communications, and they are to send it to us as well. So you guys may get notifications that they suspend rides. They do, in the contract, they are to have hearing rights and all that stuff as well. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
There's another question about who determines. And so again, I think, as Heather is saying, it depends a little bit on, is it a Medicaid eligibility issue, or is it a work, they no longer have a job, or they're no longer going to from DSA. And so ultimately, if you've got a question about that, you just want to reach out to myself or Dawn or Heather. We'd help you sort it out and figure out the next steps. There's also times when, if it's a Medicaid related issue, we just follow that process. There's a question about this being recorded and where to find this later. I think we'll post it on the transportation page, but just stay tuned for that. We'll send out a communication, as I said, as we get closer to the release of this, and we'll share with you where this will be posted. Heather or Dawn, does the case management entity need to tell the transit district what addresses the customer can use local match transportation to get to from?
That is a great question. The only time that that's necessary is there are two mass transits right now that do out of boundary transportation. And that tab I didn't go over with everybody because it's unique to those two places and they already do it, so they know how to do it. If brokerages start, then I'll go over it with them independently. But on that tab only, there is a to and from address, because we have to be able to show one of those two addresses is outside of bounds to give them the higher rate. And so that is on the CME side, that they need to identify their home address or where their starting point is and where their ending point is, that they're aware of. That doesn't have to be changed every single day. It doesn't have to be changed every single week. It just needs to be able to identify initially when you authorize this each month, it's because they're going between here and there. Then on the mass transit side, they have the same obligation that as they book these rides, they go back and look at their billing and go, oh, we didn't really take them out of the area today. We only took them here, so we're not going to bill for out of the area. So we might have folks that they bill us and they'll have some on this tab and some on that tab.
And some transit districts may ask for it. Each transit district is unique. I'm actually going to take this question back to some transit districts because I think it may resolve some of the issues of if they lose their job. It's a good question, so I appreciate that. But I'm going to do a little bit more research on this myself just to see, because I think some transit districts do ask for that and some don't. It just depends on the transit district.
And they've never, it's not something I've had on the form for the base stuff in the past. But contrary to some people's belief, it was because I didn't want to put a more workload on the same me to have to every month go, where are they at and where are they going? But we may have to get to that if we continue to have reports of issues of they left work and we didn't know. That might be one way to mitigate that. The other thing, somebody had asked further up, and I can't find the question now, about does this form need to be looked at every single month? And yes, it does. It's no different than if a service was an express and it expired, you'd have to take them off. And one way to mitigate issues is each month to take a quick look. You don't have to retype everything and re-enter everything. It's look at what you have, make sure it's okay. And it may be the person who does this form for me is not the case manager. So you'll have to have some kind of process where you have your case managers peek at their list and go, yep, they're still good, or whatever your internal process is. But the expectation is that it be looked at each month so that the mass transit provider isn't being authorized for somebody that expired or that no longer needs the service or qualifies for the service. And fingers crossed, before I retire, it will be an express. Once it's an express, it'll be just like you would have with any other plan of care item or service that's in there, is once they're expired, or once you've stopped it, it's stopped and they can't bill. But we're not there yet. And because this program affects pretty much at the state level me, it's not been a top priority to get in there with all the other big fish that we have to fry on things.
And Terry, I think that may have answers your question of when is it going into Express. It is hopefully before Dawn and I retire.
Yeah.
And
Is
I
that
also,
like next year then? Or?
No, I'm not that fortunate. I'm at least 9 years out. So we've got 9 years.
Well,
and I'm further out.
I have 4.5, so I've got 4.5 years.
I know. I'm sorry, Terry. You're stuck with me for 4.5 more years.
Not you. No, not you. Not other. No, I'm just saying the whole process. It would be so much easier in Express.
Yeah, I think it will be to some extent. It may not be easier. It will be a learning curve for the mass transit folks, and a little bit different for them because going in and billing directly in the system is going to be a real big difference for them. But for our side, I think it will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, a little better and more familiar to how you do other services. But unfortunately, like I said, it's not. And the reason it's not a top priority, besides the fact that I'm the only one who has to really look at it on our side, is that it's not just a simple put in a service like you would other services, because it's not a fee for service. It's, do they have the money to match? It has some back and forth that has to happen on authorizing. So it's kind of like a hybrid between a regular service and case management. So as we all know, case management can be an interesting one with the whole RFFS process. It's going to be kind of a hybrid of that and then a little bit more, because not only can you authorize, they have to accept the authorization. So how do we make that happen to where we're not authorizing more than they can afford? And then we can't just auto pay them. It still has to go through that check and balance to say, yes, they're eligible. So I think I've written up, in my time of doing this, I've probably written up 5 different ways to do it. And we think, all right, it's going to go. And then something else happens at the federal level or the state level that trumps my stuff going in. And then we look at the process differently because something else came along and we went, oh, that didn't work right. Good thing we didn't do it. So long-winded answer. I'm good at those.
Question about, can you give an example of someone accessing an in-home support and when this would be a good alternative to a TriMet list pass? And is there some sort of grace period around accessing transportation while the bus pass is put back into their ISP?
Yeah, that second question was just a follow-up to my last question, that if this person is found ineligible, it takes some time to get those transportation services back in. So what's the stopgap there?
I can't speak for Heather, but I will say this. It is a Medicaid service. So if the reason is they lost Medicaid, I don't know how we deal with it. We will have to deal with it because legally they can't bill Medicaid for it. It is a 100% Medicaid program.
Yeah,
So
well, we would have to issue a NOPA in that case, and they would be able to access those services through the notification
Yeah.
period.
And that's fine, but we'll have to work with, what I'm trying to say is on my end, it couldn't be local match. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't be paying through another way to get them that lift pass, but they wouldn't be able to bill us through local match. That's all.
Okay, so
We
it'd
don't
be
have,
like a general funds request or something, probably.
it's possible. I can't speak to that because I'm not policy. So that is Acacia's group would have to decide what do we do with that. And I'm not trying to be skirt around the issue. It's just for me, I only look at the local match portion, and definitely we would get in big time trouble if we billed. Local match is probably one of the strictest when it comes to are you Medicaid or not.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think it really would come down to, if they're losing the local match because they're no longer working, for a period of time, we would obviously have some time to get them, once they got another job or a new DSA or a new employment program, we would have time to get them either back on local match. If it was more of a Medicaid, like they were losing Medicaid, you're right, we would have some of that grace period to do like a different form of transportation, potentially through general fund while we went through that period of time. But it would be one of those things where we would probably just need to stop it and figure out what the needs of that person was so that we could continue to, get them to from work if that's what they needed.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I think that kind of helps then just kind of bring me back to that. The top question there is just around an example of when this is going to be a good resource for people who are in home and who have access to TriMet Lift.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a little bit, it's a little bit more challenging when you're thinking about folks in home and they're going to need both community transportation and to from work. But I think a lot of it, Sarah, is thinking about those folks who are really door to door. And so that TriMet Lift Pass, or not Lift, sorry, the regular TriMet Pass is not going to be sufficient. And so maybe they can do door to door for to from work, and then, use a personal support worker or others for, community transportation when that's what they need. So I think that's really going to be a big difference is, the individuals who really need that door to door transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I've covered local match off and on. Every time I try to get rid of it, it comes back like a boomerang. I've covered local match for probably 12 years now, with a few breaks here and there. And I would say majority of the folks are in home that have it, and they do have they'll have, mileage for their, and I keep calling it WE, and I apologize if that's confusing to people, but the community not related to and from work or DSA, they'll have mileage. Some of them will have a bus pass. I mean, that's not abnormal. That's fairly normal to see. I don't know if that helps answer that, but
Yeah,
I
that's
don't,
helpful.
I mean, it's very normal to see that. And in all my time of doing this, denials because somebody didn't have Medicaid, I could probably count over 12 years, maybe 40 of them in 12 years between the entire state. It's not super common that happens. And when it becomes a big issue is if the mass transit provider doesn't bill timely and it's 6 months later that they've billed, it becomes an issue because now that person may not have been eligible for an entire 6 months. And because I didn't have the form set up the way it is now, where you really do need to check and answer those questions, it became kind of not everybody, so I want to stress that. For some of my CMEs, it became just, oh, they're on the list, I'll just keep approving this each month without any going back and double checking. And so in those situations, we've had some big dollars that got denied and had to go through some kind of a process to figure out how is this going to get paid for, because I can't bill Medicaid for it. And we're trying to prevent those from happening. And like I said, I could count probably 40 people statewide in 12 years that's happened with. And then as for not having DD eligibility at all, I would say that's probably maybe 5 on the high side. The typical is usually there was a lapse in them having an authorization for employment. That's probably the number one I see. And a lot of times when we reach out, it's, oh, we just didn't get to putting it in Express yet.
So there's a couple of questions still coming, a little bit more about the process. So when is the spreadsheet due to ODDS for someone to get services for the following month?
So I'll take on that one, and it is in the worker guide, and we provided an example. So the CME, and I'm just going to read, and I will copy and paste this into the chat as well. The CME will send the monthly ridership roster to the local match provider, the transit district, for pre-approved rides no later than the 15th of the month prior to the start of rides. So, for example, if we're looking at you guys using rides on July 1st, you would submit that list to the transit district on the 15th of June. Then the CME must send the final approval list to the transit district no later than the last day of the month prior. So sometimes there's changes in that list. So we want to make sure that the most recent list is to the transit district by June 30th, if we're using that same example of starting on July 1st. And
then the June 30th one, I would like to, CAU needs to get a copy of that one too.
Yeah. And then there's an example. If there are updates throughout the month of service, an updated list must be sent to the transit district no later than the 15th of the month, which would be July 15th in my example, and a final list on the last day of the month, which is July 31st. There's 31 days in July? I think so.
Yeah.
So I will cut, this is in the worker guide, and I will copy and paste this also into the chat so you guys have it. Does that answer your question, Anne?
We're going to take that as a yes. The last question I saw is, if someone is authorized local match but aren't currently using it, the job's on hold or something's going on, does the mass transit provider still get money, or only if the person uses the rides?
Only if they use the rides. They get paid ride by ride. That's why they have to do the little tally marks of 111. They literally get paid a rate per ride is how local match is set up.
Which is why we've seen some shifts with COVID. So they've had some people not ride. So yeah. COVID has caused all kinds of.
And that's going to be an interesting one. I'm not sure how, I honestly don't know how each mass transit's going to handle that, because right. They already have a list of folks that are authorized for rides. But out of that, I'm seeing pretty consistently throughout the state that they might be at like 1/10, if even that, of what their ridership was prior to COVID. And so I don't know if that means that they'll open up their list and take new people who really want to ride right now and have the ability to for their job, or if they're, like I said, I'm not sure how they're going to look at that, because, for some of them, for the bigger providers, they might have had 200 to 300 people on local match that consistently rode, and now maybe 15 are riding. So I really don't know what the capacity is going to look like.
Okay. We've got a couple more questions about when, again, to use local match. So for local match, for a customer to get to from their DSA or employment site, as long as they don't also need lifts to get to other community locations. And I think in this case, the local match can be used for to from work or to from DSA, but it is door to door. So it's traditionally what I would think of as Lyft. And so it's folks who need that door to door, and they might have a different type of community transportation if they need it.
I think, Acacia, I was going to chime in here because maybe I might be reading this wrong, and I apologize is it Nathan Harmon? I can only see N Harmon. For some reason, I think it's Nathan or Nick. You can tell me if I've got that wrong. Yay, Nate. All right. My brain isn't completely failing me. On this situation where you're saying they already have a Lyft pass, if I'm reading this right, then you wouldn't do local match, because that would be double dipping. We would be paying mass, like for example, TriMet. We would be paying TriMet a monthly rate for Lyft door to door. We can't turn around and then have them bill us ride for ride when they already get paid for a pass for the month.
But if they were primarily going door to door to from DSA or employment, they could switch from Lyft to local match, right, Don? Because the local match would be $0 state dollars and it would be the same.
But then how do they get to their community events?
Well, that's when
Can't,
this is,
at
right.
that point, they can't buy a Lyft pass for that. It would have to be a different transportation.
But that's what I'm saying, Don. And for Nate, I think that's going to be what's going to be the decision maker for you. What is the person using the transportation for? Do they need to from? Are they primarily using personal support workers for things other than to from work or to from DSA? If it's Lyft, that's really to from work and to from DSA, but not all the other community outings, then it might make sense to move them from Lyft to local match, because that would be a more cost-effective way to get the same service. But if they're using Lyft for lots of things on that monthly pass and they're not using PSWs or other
Exactly.
types of local transportation, then you wouldn't want to switch them. And again, this becomes the challenge again for folks that are new in brokerage, primarily in-home individuals. It's going to be different, and it's really just going to depend on that person's needs and how they're currently accessing transportation.
And somebody asked about Lyft. LYFT is not the Lyft we're talking about. Lyft is TriMet calls their door-to-door service Lyft, LIFT. And they call it a Lyft pass. None of this local match has anything to do with Uber, Lyft, or any of that. No problem. Don't say sorry. I would have probably done the same thing, especially if I'm not used to hearing the word Lyft.
So then there's a question about the ADA assessment prior to authorizing rides, which I think is fairly common. Can they put them on the roster before the assessment comes back? Because it can take over a month for that assessment. Or do they need to wait for the assessment before they put them on the roster?
That is, I've never been asked that question before. I honestly don't know how they would know beforehand if you don't put them on the roster. I don't know how you would. I guess if you're reaching out to them to find out if they have capacity to grow, then you would know then. I honestly don't know the answer to this question. That's a really good question. I don't know how, Terry and those folks who've worked with TriMet in the past, which I think is our biggest ADA folks that actually do an assessment beforehand, or Marion County. Can any of you say how that goes for you currently now, if you're on
Rogue
here?
Valley does it too, and I don't remember how they do it. Or not Rogue Valley, Columbia Cat does it too, and I can't remember how they do it.
Clackamas County currently waits until TriMet identifies the person as eligible to receive door-to-door Lyft services.
Which seems fair. I mean, that seems like the right thing to do.
And we don't put them on, I don't put them on my roster until, we know for sure that client is eligible for door-to-door Lyft service.
Thank you, Terry. I figured that would be the case. I just didn't want to say it and be like, it's different. I mean, that's pretty much internal management stuff that you guys are doing with your mass transit folks is Terry's established a relationship with them. I'm sure a lot of other folks that are that contact person have as well, and they have their process set up how they do it.
Okay.
And Terry, you've asked, can the client have mileage service and local match service? That would be through the exceptions process. You would have to put in an exception. We would have to review the reasoning and go through that process. Is there a threshold for how much they would need to use the Lyft for non-DSA employment? If they ever use it for community, can we keep purchasing a Lyft pass through the standard process?
I answered that one, Heather, a little bit in the
Okay.
chat. And so much of this is just going to be case by case and dependent upon the person and what they have available to them. And we're happy to staff some scenarios. If they use the lift one time to go one place in the community that the PSW could take them to, you know, it might make more sense to go local match. But if they use it frequently or they don't have any alternative transportation, then it might make sense to put them on the lift. That's really going to be person by person and team by team. So I think just in the interest of time, I know we were scheduled until 10, but the questions have definitely slowed down. I would say we're gonna stop, I'm gonna stop the recording and just ask anybody wanna come off